Hi, welcome to or back to my channel. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about everything that I think is wrong with the Heroes of Olympus. After reading the entire series, don't get me wrong, I liked a lot of individual books, but I also found a lot of things that I wasn't very happy with in the series in general, so I decided to make this video. Disclaimer, I'm not trying to hate on anyone who loved the series. I personally did enjoy reading the books, but there are definitely some things that I would like to change about it. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree with this. These are just my own opinions, and of course, everyone's entitled to their own. Also, spoiler alert, I'm going to be spoiling things that happen in the Heroes of Olympus, and obviously, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the problems that I found in each individual books, but also what I liked in a lot of them. Before we get started, please subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and share. Okay, so first up we have The Lost Hero. I don't really have much to say about this book. I mean, I just wasn't a huge fan, and I can definitely say the same for a lot of the fandom. I just found a lack of the original characters, and it was a little bit boring because of that. I mean, they could have had more stuff at Camp Half-Blood with more previously established and beloved characters like Kieran and Annabeth and so on. I mean, it's actually a pretty big change compared to Percy Jackson and the Olympians, because this new series focuses more on romance and friendships and the characters' relationships than it does with the whole mythological adventure storyline thing. In that same, it's like a little bit of a genre shift, but it was, on its own, it's a pretty good book, and it did a good job of starting off the Heroes of Olympus series. It established new villains and new characters, and we learned more about the prophecy of the Seven, and we just really learned more about everything, and it started off this new series pretty well. One plotline that I do not get at all was the whole Jason and Talia being long-lost siblings thing. It just seemed so far-fetched, and it just made it feel like a soap opera, and it really doesn't add anything to the plot, not just in this book, but in the entire series. At no point is them being siblings related to the plot in any way. But aside from that, I don't really have a lot of issues with this book. It was, it was okay. It wasn't the worst book, it wasn't the best book, it was just sort of there. So next up we have The Son of Neptune, the second book in the series, where we finally see Percy. Something that's really weird about this book though is that the timeline is basically just a week long. It's pretty short. And I find it so funny that Jason got like 8 months to get everyone to trust him and to get like adjusted at Camp Half-Blood, and some people like Annabeth and all still have some trouble trusting him, but Hera gives Percy a week to trust everyone and he still becomes like Praetor. It's pretty funny to me. But all in all, it kind of felt like Rick Riordan was just trying to spin out Percy's story in this book. Don't get me wrong, I love him as a character, he's so fun, and I liked seeing him in this book. But after The Last Olympian, Percy's arc was pretty much wrapped up, and he was only brought back so that the readers would stay interested. This book and this entire series didn't really do much for his plotline and his arc in general, but I guess it was fun to see him. And the other two main characters, Frank and Hazel. They're actually pretty interesting characters, but I know a lot of people, myself included, felt like they were just reading through their chapters to try to get to the ones from Percy's POV. But they were both actually pretty interesting characters, and I'd love to see more from them, and from Reyna too. But in their relationship, phrasal or whatever, it just felt really rushed. I mean, I get that they were together or like friends or whatever before the timeline of the book, but we didn't see much of them in the book as readers, so that didn't really make sense to me. But overall, it wasn't a bad book. It does a good job of continuing on the Percy Jackson and the Olympians legacy, and it does a good job of continuing the Heroes of Olympus from The Lost Hero. It has a pretty good ending, and it leaves us on a cliffhanger waiting to see what happens, and it brought readers back for the next book, so props to Rick Riordan for that. So on to my personal favorite book in the Heroes of Olympus series, The Mark of Athena. I loved how we finally get to see Annabeth's perspective in this book, especially in all the Percabeth moments where we're used to just seeing Percy's POV from Percy Jackson and the Olympians. But one thing I'll forever hate is that they should have had Annabeth on the cover. It was her time to shine. She was basically leading everyone. She had the solo quest. She was the one managing it all. She should have been on the cover. And I'll forever hate that she wasn't. But aside from that, another issue I found was there was a lot of unnecessary tension or like a battle for leadership between Percy and Jason. It was so clear that Annabeth was the one who was really in charge. Plus, neither of them ever really liked or wanted to be leaders. They were just forced into it because of their parentage. They were both kids of the big three. So I don't understand why all of a sudden they were just fighting for the leadership. Aside from that, there are some continuity issues between the Son of Neptune and the start of Mark of Athena. There are around 10 minutes max between the ending of the last book and the start of this one. But between the book's release, there was actually 1 year, so I guess it makes sense that there were some issues. One that I found the most noticeable was with Frank's abilities. I mean, at the end of Son of Neptune, he had recently discovered his powers and was learning how to control them. But at the beginning of Mark of Athena, he was basically a pro and was great. Another plot that I didn't really get was the whole Hazel, Frank, and Leo love triangle. It seemed so unnecessary and added nothing to the plot. Again, this just felt like one of Rick's attempts to make it more appealing to an older audience with romance and drama and everything. But the storyline of Leo's grandfather, Sammy, was interesting. I had fun reading it, but it was just a dead end and it added like nothing to the story in my opinion. But the ending of this book was so tragic. I was screaming and crying and everything, but it was so good at the same time. It was such a great ending. I loved it, but I hated it at the same time as a reader. To be honest though, great writing, hats off to Rick Riordan for that. All in all, despite all of the issues and everything in this book, it was definitely my favorite book in this entire series, closely followed by our fourth book, House of Hades. Throughout all of House of Hades, it just kind of felt like it was stabbing you multiple times in the heart, but at the same time, my favorite storyline was Percy and Annabeth trapped in Tartarus. I don't know if this is just me being a Perciveth shipper, but it was so good and so interesting. Only thing is, it kind of felt like I was just skipping through everyone else's POVs, just waiting to find another chapter from one of their points of views. So I guess that wasn't the best. But aside from that, it was really great to see Hazel's powers flourishing and her becoming more comfortable with them and in her own skin, both as a witch and as a daughter of Hades, or Pluto, I guess. It was also pretty good to see Frank accepting who and what he was, and his parentage and his abilities in general. Aside from that though, Leo and Calypso, they were so rushed and unrealistic. If you guys want, I can make another video talking about all the relationships in the Heroes of Olympus, but theirs in general, it didn't make sense to me. It didn't feel realistic. It was just, I couldn't really see it happening. But I don't really have much to say about the House of Hades, so let's go to the last book of the series, The Blood of Olympus. This was the worst book. I feel like a lot of the fandom would agree with me. If you don't, I'm sorry, this is just my opinion. I just feel like it was the worst book in general. I mean, it went so slowly at the beginning and it had such a rushed ending that barely made any sense, but just to make things make sense for the plot. But another thing that I didn't really get was why were Reina and Nico's POVs included? I mean, I like them as characters, I enjoyed reading their perspectives, but they weren't one of the seven, and the series generally centers around the prophecy of the seven, so why were their perspectives even included? It just doesn't make sense. But aside from that, I hated how Percy and Annabeth's traumas from Tartarus weren't addressed at all. They were both sidelined and overlooked so much. Both their powers and their trauma were overlooked, and this is actually the only book where there were no chapters even talking about them much, anything from their perspectives, and it just didn't make sense to me, and I hated that. I just can't. But aside from that, let's just go to the minor stuff and then we'll work our way up to the stuff that makes my blood boil. The unnecessary beef between Leo and Percy. I don't get it. I get that Leo had a thing for Calypso, but why? I mean, Percy Percy has nothing against him, neither does Leo. They were good friends. This beef was just, I don't get it at all. But aside from that, the biggest issue in this book, Gaia was built up so much. She was supposed to be such an awful villain, even worse than Kronos, and it was hinted that there were going to be so many casualties, especially someone from the Seven probably dying. And sure, Leo dies, but he's literally brought back almost 2 seconds later before we even process that he's dead. And the way that she's killed, she's built up so much to be killed in a matter of minutes, and only by Leo, Jason, and mostly Piper, not even by the whole Seven, and that just doesn't make sense to me. Another thing is, during the whole battle, why was Percy commanding the Greeks? I mean, it was fun. You know, his little line was, "Greeks, let's fight stuff." It was funny, okay? It was a cute little moment, but it should have been Annabeth. She was at that camp from the age of 7. She knows all the people there, and while Percy has been missing for like a year or so, she was there. She knows all the people there. Half of them don't even know this guy. They're probably standing there wondering, who the hell is this guy that's being like, let's fight stuff. It didn't make sense. You know, one of the few things I actually enjoyed was watching the beginning of Solangelo, but even that, I can see why some people feel like it's too rushed. I mean, we actually see more of them in Trials of Apollo, but we don't really see their relationship flourish much because they become boyfriend and all. They start that romantic relationship in between Heroes of Olympus and the Trials of Apollo, so we don't see much of that, which I wasn't a fan of because I actually thought they were pretty cute. But aside from everything, I bring back the main thing. Why did no one die? It was hinted that there were going to be so many casualties, and this was a villain worse than Kronos, and things were going to be awful, and so many people were going to die. One person that we actually know and is an established character dies, Leo, and he's brought back like 3 seconds later. You know, this was literally just the worst book in all of the Heroes of Olympus. You cannot change my mind. I'm sorry if I'm offending you or anyone, but it was the worst book. And on that very fun note, I'm going to be ending this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry if I offended anyone with this. I like the series in whole. It's a really great series, and I don't have a lot against this. These are just the things that I would love to change about it. Anyways, this is going to be the end of this video. Let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see a part 2 or a part 3 where I talk about the different relationships and friendships, dynamics, and characters in the Heroes of Olympus. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you get updated if and when I upload something like that. Other than that, give this video a like, share this video and my channel. Thank you guys for watching. Bye!